Good day. Welcome to the Black Wall Street Speakeasy. We are so excited to be here for that first discussion around issues that are going on in Durham around politics. We'd like to raise the awareness, help business community and other community leaders to understand how we can move forward in our city council race. We're fortunate enough to have 4 of our city council candidates here today. We will have them each introduce themselves and talk around various issues, but we will go forward first and speak to our city council candidate, Leonardo Williams. Please tell us who you are and why you're here.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to be here, actually. I'm Leonardo Williams. I'm a small business owner here in Durham, former 2-time Teacher of the Year. This work is really important to me. That's why I'm here. It's important that I play a part in bringing awareness to how we grow our city, how we actually engage our community, and how we thrive as a people. So I own 2 restaurants, soon to open 3, the third one. And it just feels really good to be in a position to provide jobs for our community, to make sure that, we thrive together to afford to live in Durham. And just do good work to take care of my neighbor and my neighbor take care of me. And that just helps me live day to day.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Hey, next we'd like to go to Pastor Williams. Talk to us a little about why you're here and thank you for being here.
I'm Sylvester Williams, running for Ward 2, City Council. I'm world travel. I'm a pastor, a financial analyst, retired. And one of the things that I've seen that in my exposure as being a financial analyst and being a pastor, I've come across the great cross sections of life of where people are. Being a financial analyst, I work with millionaires, manage billions of dollars. So I understand that part of it. I think that a lot of our people do not understand. But also as being a pastor, I've met people who are been homeless, people who didn't have food to eat. And so I understand that part of it too. And I think that in running for city council that I'm trying to bring those two together, because I think what you tend to have are you have the extremes. One either understand the financial or one understand the people that are in poverty, but not someone who can bring both together. And I think that with the position that I'm running for, and most importantly of all is my love for the Lord Jesus who commands me to reach out to those who've been overlooked and those who've been left out. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for city council here in the city of Durham.
Thank you so much. I'd like to go to Mark Anthony Middleton. Please tell us why you're here today.
Well, first off, let me say good morning, Farad. It's good to see you. It's an honor to be amongst such distinguished people. Eat your heart out, my high school guidance counselor. My name is Mark Anthony Middleton. I'm the incumbent. I currently sit in the Ward 2 seat on the Durham City Council. I'm seeking the permission of the people of the city to serve another 4 years because I think I have a compelling case to make for another 4 years based upon some conversations that I've started and work that I've done that I think needs to be carried on. Work in codifying guaranteed income. It takes 4 votes to get anything done in the city council. Work in continuing to build coalitions to get things done. Work to make sure that Black Wall Street is not just a romantic rallying cry looking backwards, but that the ecosystem is created to revive that spirit and the economic realities of Black Wall Street here in in this city, so that so many people look to as the cornerstone of Black aspiration and Black excellence. That's why I'm here. I'm asking for permission for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. AJ, thank you for being here. Tell us why you're here today.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is AJ Williams. I am running for Durham City Council in the Ward 3 race. I'm here because being a 4th-generation Durhamite, seeing the way that the city has changed has really impacted the residents that have been here. And I want to ensure that everybody gets to benefit from the ways that Durham is changing. I am a community organizer, been involved with a formation called Durham Beyond Policing, as well as Southerners on Dune Ground, as well as Black Youth Project 100. That's really the basis of the tenets of my platform, being led by the people and really mobilizing people power to get things done on a municipal level. And I'm honored to be sitting here amongst all of the candidates and our incumbent, and really look forward to running this race. And we'll see y'all in November.
All right. Thank you, AJ Williams. We appreciate it. Listen, this is going to be a conversation. I'm not going to call on you. I'm just going to throw a subject out there and have us to discuss it. So I'd like to let you all know you're very familiar with what's going on in Durham today. We have people sometimes call it law enforcement. Some people call it public safety. I call it how do we work together in a collective. So we don't need to talk about the current station. All you all know that. Tell us a little bit how do you feel about what's going on with the crime or the public safety issues, or as you look at law enforcement in our community today. And I don't want to just talk about one area. Like a lot of people like to just talk around, well, something's happening in Daymar Court, or something's happening in these areas that we consider to be disinvested. Crime is a citywide issue. We may be only talking about the people that may have gotten shot or may have been robbed or any other bad ideas, but crime is really an overall city issue as you look at public perception. So I'd like to hear your opinions on crime and law enforcement in our community.
Well, what I like to say, one thing I think about is something that my mother's cousin told me, that when he was young, and he was having a little spat with some other young people, and so he got his gun, came out and shot the butts up. And the police came there to arrest him, and he had the gun in his hand. And police told him to drop his gun. He didn't drop it. Told him again to drop his gun. He didn't drop it. The third time, say, drop your gun. The police officer clicked his. That's when he dropped it. But he wasn't shot. He wasn't killed. And one of the things that it showed me is that when you have police officers who are invested in the community, who understand the community, a lot of the police officers on the City of Durham police force, they're not from Durham. So it's hard for them to understand the dynamics of what's taking place in Durham. But what you have there was a white police officer that came out from my cousin and didn't shoot or kill him, gave him an opportunity to go and join the military instead of being shot dead. And I think that when you understand that, then you can have a better rapport between police officers and also between those who are living in the community. The other thing that I say is this right here, is that a lot of poverty that you see in the city of Durham is what's causing a lot of this crime. So when you start addressing the poverty issue, when you start addressing people not having jobs, you also start addressing the crime issues. And the last point I'd like to make is this right here. Our former chief of police, she wanted 72 additional police officers. She only ended up, the city manager at the time ended up giving her 18. But those 18, 5 of them, they put towards this mental development, so they froze those positions, took those positions away. And then the other 15, they took 15 positions that was to be filled, the police department, and they froze those positions. So what they were saying, if you look over the city of Durham, you see that basically the killings and shootings are taking place in black communities. So it seems like they're indifferent to the concerns of blacks being killed. Like they don't care. And that's why I'm running for office, to make sure that those people who don't have that voice, that they're being heard.
Thank you. Who'd like to add on to that point?
Well, Pastor Williams is running for my seat. I'm not one of those people he's talking about that don't care about people, black people being killed. You can't, I think, watch the news in this city any given week and not see me on there trying to issue a clarion call to deal with this issue. I want to inject some light into this conversation because there's plenty of heat, not enough light. Here's some facts. A year ago, I was the first elected official in the city to call for the training and deployment of unarmed mental health responders. I was the first elected official to call for the expansion of violence interrupters, a non-policing intervention to deal with gun crime in the city. I was the first to call for a pilot of guaranteed income and universal basic income in the city, root causes. I was the first to call for a Marshall Plan. After World War II, the United States poured millions of dollars to rebuild Europe, a Marshall Plan type investment plan into legacy neighborhoods, multifaceted, comprehensive approach to gun violence. Listen, as a sitting government official, I understand that it's important to have a multitude of tools to respond to a multitude of situations. The end result is to keep black and brown and mentally challenged folk alive. As a government official, I want to be able to send unarmed mental health responders to folk that need it. But if white supremacists storm my city center, I'm not sending unarmed mental health responders. I'm sending a SWAT team. And in order to do that as a government, you have to have a whole host of tools. And what's happened in Durham is we've got some folk who want one and some folk who want the other. Quite honestly, we have folks shouting at each other that are ideologically entrenched. But I'm not only a progressive, I'm a governing progressive. And the question for me is, and then no one has answered this question yet, how many officers does it take? What's the magic number to secure people of 300,000 people? City, not just the people who are in your particular portfolio of activism, but 300,000 people that I raised my hand and took an oath to protect. And when I have the power to freeze population growth, that's when I'll freeze hiring officers.
Thank you for your answer. We'd like to get comments from the people who are running for office as well in Ward 3, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this issue, so I don't want this issue to be conflated in saying that by wanting stronger community investments and equal and equivalent community investments as that we have with policing, right? We have a $70 million policing budget. I don't want to conflate that with kind of an apathy for black men, boys, people dying, right, at the hands of gunfire. I think that in many ways they're connected issues, right? Because on one hand we're talking about the root causes that Councilmember Middleton just mentioned, and in that respect, doing things like decriminalizing poverty, decriminalizing substance use, decriminalizing mental illness, right? These are social ills that poor people specifically, are being penalized for. And when cops show up to situations involving someone, for instance, who may be experiencing a mental health crisis, I know a lot of folks, particularly in my generation and my peer group, who are afraid to call the police. Because the fear of the interactions that may take place based on what we've seen on our social media feeds, right? This constant consumption of dead black bodies on social media. That is what is at hand for my generation. And so I agree that we need, in fact, the work that I've been doing with Durham Beyond Policing is really advocating for skilled, unarmed care responders to respond to things that don't actually require a armed law enforcement officer to appear on the scene. And I think there's also this issue, right? So the city commissioned RTI to do this 911 calls for service report, in which 80% of those calls were actually nuisance calls, traffic incidents, interpersonal disputes, things of that nature. And then 20% of those calls were actually property damage, or crimes against property rather, and violent crime, right? So if we're able to recategorize these different calls that are coming through 911, we know that our 911 dispatch center is understaffed. And so being able to reclassify those calls and send out the appropriate response, right, to these different calls, we could actually see a dramatic difference in how we approach these solutions, right? We don't need to, we can actually dramatically reduce the number of police who are on patrol in our city. And I think that's what we want, right? I want us to be imaginative. I don't want us to get caught up in the rhetoric of defunding the police, which is often accompanied by fear-mongering. I want us to think smart and think about what we want for our children. The tagline of my campaign is honor the legacy, build the future, right? And so we need to make sure that we all have a hands-on approach to gun violence in our city. That means the OGs, the grandmas, the elected officials, the faith leaders. Every single one of us has to be invested in making sure that our children have a safe Durham to grow up in.
Thank you so much. Mr. Williams, your response to this whole condition, this issue?
So public safety is not a binary. It's not a, do we want to have it or do we not? And
Right.
and I mean public safety, and this specifically is law enforcement. Law enforcement is just a small, well, not necessarily a small, but it's a component of how we view the overall vision of a safe community. So I challenge everyone to view the word or verbalize the word community as an action word. That's where we have to start. We all know what a beautiful community is. We want that one day. We see it on TV. Some of us have lived it. Some people have never lived it, but they aspire to have it, right? So when we have that vision, verbalizing community as an action word, we all have this utopia that we can work toward, right? So starting there. But what we do all want in this city is a safe community.
Right.
And there are sometimes we inject conversations that are foreign to our neighborhoods and foreign to our community. And that's when we become distracted. We all want to say, no matter whether you're a white woman, black woman, white male, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, we all want a safe community. And Eric Adams, who's running for mayor in New York, said it best. Public safety is a prerequisite to prosperity. It is really simple, yet complex. We want to make sure that folks are working. We want to make sure that folks who are working have access to a decent paying job. We want to make sure we're engaging our kids at a younger age. and we want to make sure that people are having access to a decent quality of life. Right now, we do have too much access to poverty. We have too much access to low income. We have too much access to, factors that generate a less than quality of life. And there's a lot of factors that play into that, from the way we equitably or inequitably fund our schools, to how our schools are reflecting our communities. You live in a nice community, you have a nice school, and we're in the same city or same county with the same tax dollars that are being contributed there. So yes, equitable funding has a part to play in it. The reality is, folks need jobs. I'm doing that. People need access to great paying jobs, decent paying jobs. I'm doing that. People want to feel safe. I'm calling on black men. My peers and I are calling on black men across this entire city. Imagine if every black man was to identify a young male of color or a young black boy and spend at least an hour with them every single week and spend time with their family. We have to be practical about this. And this is a matter of theory versus practice. We have to be practical in how we engage. We have to be practical in how we grow our community. We have to be practical in how we actually raise our kids. And that's going to take a village. So public safety is a village concept. And it's going to take all of us. So no more of the foreign conversations or dialogue. Let's talk about Durham and what's happening in Durham, from Durham, for Durham.
Hey,
Gerard,
thanks so
can I
much.
Jump in.
Yes, sir. Ms. Middleton.
Absolutely. I want to. One of the things about being an elected official is you've got to own your words. Everybody knows in this city that I've called for an experimental deployment of ShotSpotter. I can't back away from that. And and my brother AJ, I want to be clear that there's some things we can't back away from. You've been one of the chief proponents of abolishing police. You're a self-described abolitionist, which is fine. And I don't philosophically disagree with anything you've said. It's what you aren't saying and what you haven't said that's the issue for me. And I think that we have to put a governance lens to it. The part you're not saying is that you want to send unarmed mental health responders, which I've called for, by the way, over a year ago, but you also at the same time as you hire them want to take from the police department as well simultaneously. Defunding or taking from the police department for you is an article of faith. It hasn't always been tied to metrics and statistics. And listen, I've sat with 911 call takers. I've done ride-alongs with police officers. The question that's being asked is what happens when the person calls 911. That's not the critical measure. The critical measure is what happens when you get there, because oftentimes the call that comes into 911 turns into something else when you get there. I've been in police cars where we thought a minor fender bender was actually somebody that was criminally intoxicated, or somebody had a hostage in the car. What happens is when you get there, sometimes it escalates. What you're proposing is to send people who are not prepared to deal with the worst case scenario, and when they get there, make an assessment. Oh, I thought it was this when 911 called. Now it's something else. Now we're creating a situation where those folk have to now call for backup to a department that we're still using, but now has less capability. But we've got to use them anyway, as opposed to sending folk. The example I like to use is when a police officer gets to a situation and sees that they're outgunned, they'll call for SWAT. Well-trained officers can get to a situation and say, you know what, this person doesn't need a person with a gun. They need mental responders, unarmed mental health responders. Fall back, create a perimeter, and call the unarmed mental health responders so you can de-escalate the situation. In your proposal for governance, we're sending folk who may find something that's more than they can handle. Now they need to call for backup. And who are they calling for backup? The department that we've been taking resources from that we still have to use anyway. I don't think that's a good way of governance.
AJ, please. I think, AJ, he's directed it towards AJ. You have to be right, I think, for AJ to respond.
Yeah, so I think what I'm proposing is actually for us to get experimental. I think we've been doing the same thing for far too long. I know that there's an aspect of governance, and in that, pulling from the police department and letting the correlating line items be actual investments in community and building that up is going to take time. I'm not proposing that any of this is overnight. What I am proposing is that we need to do something different, right? And if we're not willing to take that risk in 10 years, when my nephew is 19, we're still going to be talking about gun violence in Durham, and we're still going to be talking about black people being killed by police because we didn't take the risk. And as elected officials, you know, I'm running. I'm not an elected official yet, but I am running, you know, on the basis that having decision-making power, we can actually change the trajectory of where our city is going. And that's what I want to see. Abolition is not just about absence, right? So it's not just about the absence of police. It's about the presence of life-affirming systems. We have to be committed to building those systems. You know, we can't say, you know, we don't have police to call, and so that's just a one-sided approach and a one-sided, idea that somehow we would not be replacing with something that would work. And so I want us to continue to think about that. And again, it's not really up to A.J. Williams. It's up to all of the community, right? I want all of us to be stakeholders and have some buy-in into this process of really building those life-affirming systems that our city needs.
Like what? What have you proposed?
I'm letting y'all talk. I mean, you know, this is a discussion. The only reason why I had him respond, AJ to respond, is because it was a direct conversation. So that's why. But please, anyone can jump in.
This is what I wanted to say is that, you know, if you appoint an official, you should be willing to place confidence in that official that you appointed. I think this was a great disservice done to the chief of police who left the city of Durham. She requested 72 additional officers because she saw the issues that were taking place in Durham, and she did not get those 72 additional police officers. This is what she does. It was her job, her responsibility, to be aware of the crime situation in Durham, to be aware of what was going on. And she brought that to the city council and did not get what she recommended. If you look at the history of it, she was one of the first ones that was totally turned down like that after making a request for additional police officers. You have to ask yourself, ask the question, why? Why was she denied that request? Why didn't they get the additional police officers? And I think the thing we have to look at, and if we want to be honest about Black Wall Street or anything else, you have to look at the color. Are they really paying attention to the people who are being slaughtered in the streets? I know in the community where I live, there was a young black man that was murdered 1 block away from where I live. And a mental health expert can't do any good when the person is dead. They have no protection. Calling police officers and there's no one there. One lady had her house to be broken into. It took the police hours to get there. My house, when someone stole something from my house, called the police officer. Took them like 3-4 hours to get there. That's not what we want in Durham. We don't want that delayed reaction. And so you can bring all the mental health experts out there you want to. We're looking for protection and safety. We want to feel that we can walk anywhere in Durham and feel safe. And there are people now in black communities that don't feel safe because they don't see anyone offer them any protection. And I know because I deal with them on a daily basis. I went down to McDougal Terrace doing an interview on the television, Channel 17 News. Tried to get, because I'd done the funeral for a young man who was shot down, killed here in Durham, in McDougal Terrace. I did the funeral for the young man. And I tried to go and get the people in the community to come out to speak on camera about the problems that they were having. No one would come out because they were too afraid to come out from their front door. They were too afraid. There were gangbangers up throwing signs up. I tried to get them to come on camera. They wouldn't do it either. What I'm saying, people need to feel safe in the city of Durham. And if you're out there involved in the community, you know they don't feel safe. So all this rhetoric about mental health experts, they're not involved in the community. They're not out there dealing with the people. They don't know what families are going through. I do. I deal with them on a daily basis. I see what's happening. And that's what we need, people who are actively involved in the community rather than sitting up in an office looking out saying, oh, the city looks fair, the city looks good. People who are actually involved and they're concerned about what's taking place in the city of Durham. And that's one of the things that I would do in office. I would recommend those 72 officers that Chief Davis recommended, that we would go back and revisit that, bringing additional officers here to the city of Durham, and on top of that, making sure they're coming from the city of Durham. Because if you're vested in the city of Durham, you are less likely to commit some of these horrendous things that we hear about the police doing now.
Okay, thank you.
I want to if we can, I just want to bring us back, because when we zone in on just policing, we're doing ourselves a disservice, and I think actually, in fact, it's a distraction. And what I mean by that is we just went through an entire pandemic, and I'll give you two examples. Watts Elementary, I believe it was, over the pandemic, the students at that school, their reading scores dropped maybe about 4 points or 4%. The students at Eastway Elementary, they're now down to 8% proficiency in reading. That's an entire year and a half to two that we just lost. What's going to happen when those kids continue to progress to the next grade level? They're going to struggle. And one thing I learned in both years that I was teacher of the year is when kids are bored, they get in trouble. Most of the time, if they're bored, they're going to get in trouble. If they're not challenged, they're going to get in trouble. But also if they're not interested. If they lose interest, we lose them. And they're either bored or they're losing interest when they're just not engaged in the learning process. And when they're not engaged in the learning process, it's usually because we've lost them somewhere along the line. Why am I talking about education and the conversation of public safety? It's because we start to lose our kids. Why do you think we use the word dropout, but really we're pushing them out? If we don't do something really quick right now, in 10 years, those second and third graders that just dropped from 30 whatever percent or 20 whatever percent down to 8% proficiency, we're going to lose them in one of those grades. And when they get about 15 to 17 years old, they just might drop out, or we push them out. The average age of perpetrators in this city right now are young black males between the age of 15 and 17 years old. That is where we are. And if we don't do something now, we don't broaden this conversation and get out of the idea cloud and more so be more practical in the process of how we address it now so we can address it then, we're going to find ourselves continue to talk about the same issue.
I like to thank the Black Wall Street and the Durham Chamber of Commerce, as well as Complex Creative, for allowing us to have this event. And those are business leaders. So I too am a business leader. I run a business, a fairly sizable business, as well as a community leader in this region, in the RTP region. And I will tell you, as companies are looking to come to our area, they do look at crime, and they look at the public safety issues and how we're investing in our children from a workforce development issue. And that's how we look at it, right? From economic development. We look at investing in our children as a workforce development issue. We look at this crime as allowing people to come to the area because it'd be safe for them to buy housing. And we look at the importance of economic development. Truth be told, 70 to 80% of the issues that you deal with on city council are around land planning. I just want to make sure we're clear on this. And land planning creates the economic development opportunities. So I'm really interested in you all to discuss an economic development strategy that will help propel Durham in a way that allows for corporations to want to come here and to recognize the impact of economic development on some gentrification issues or in employment issues or in finding ways to do workforce development. I'm not trying to answer your question, but I want you to think about the work of the city council ability to impact or influence those things and speak strict to the issues. It's on you all. Economic development.
Yeah, I think there's some existing initiatives from the city, specifically around the strategic plan and the shared economic prosperity. With the city and increasing the youth internship program from 200 placements to 1,000 placements, to making sure that there are job opportunities for folks who are formerly incarcerated. So I think there's things moving. I think that there's ways that we can incentivize businesses to come to the city, but we have to make sure that businesses aren't just like extracting from the city in a way that is just to create profit, but what are the investments that businesses are willing to make back into black and brown communities? One of the things that I would like to introduce is a city-funded initiative to actually give folks who are lower income residents the opportunity to earn technology certifications and vocational trade certificates, things of that nature, to create opportunities to build wealth, particularly for black folks. We know that home ownership, for instance, is the number one asset that we have to build wealth, which is often why folks who are concerned about losing their homes in Durham know it's because we have typically one asset that's been passed in our family for generations, and we have to stay current on property taxes in order to have that. So increasing opportunities to have folks have viable, not just viable but gainful employment, right? That puts them in a position, but we have to create the opportunities for our city not to just be attractive to businesses coming here, but to make sure that we're creating the opportunities for Black and brown folks specifically to benefit from that.
Thank you.
So, first, our city, let me just say I'm running for Ward 3 City Council to make our council better. There are some initiatives that are in place, but I wouldn't do this unless I felt I could contribute something to, better or more. Our city has to be a visionary. In order for it to do that, it has to be led by visionaries. But also, within those visionaries have to have the capability of management. And I currently run a small business, and we're doing fairly well. We're doing fairly well because of our engagement with the community. But the reason why I talk about our city as a visionary is because we're going through a pandemic, and it has its effects. Real estate is going to look very different in this city. And if we don't get ahead of that, and if we don't expand our perception on how we utilize what resources we have access to, again, we're going to continue to be behind the eight ball. Offices do not need as much office space anymore. What's going to happen to that commercial space? Well, it's up to the city council to rezone that and make it multi-use. It's up to us as the city council to actually look at an office space and say, how can I actually use this mega office, complex for, diverse housing options with commercial base floors to actually subsidize being able to ensure that we can have a diverse population or tenant population in that building. But also, in order for us to strengthen the businesses that are already here, and I'm living this every day, we have to have a better streamlined process that supports our small businesses. You'll be hard pressed to find a very robust support system in Durham right now for small businesses. There are businesses right now where they've been proposed from the city where they have to pay for a fire hydrant, and of course Durham ultimately won't put that responsibility on a business owner, but the process to get the approval to say no, you don't have to pay for that fire hydrant is extensive, and the amount of money that we have to actually put up before we can actually break ground, that's an ultimate tax that not the average person in Durham can actually afford. It's very normal to put almost $100,000 into an investment of opening a small business here in Durham before we actually get to make a single amount of profit or either start or generating revenue. That is a problem. So Durham has to become friendlier to the small businesses, the small business community. And, we're not the big boys. And I'm talking about locally owned small businesses. You can have Apple and Google come here and you say, all right, you have to put up $1 million before you break ground. They can do that. But Leo and Zweli can't do that. We are very much like other business owners in the community where we will wipe out our retirement and take a bet on us. That's a realistic thing. So we can't have a system, and it's not that the government is preying on small business owners here. It's that we need better support. We need a system that supports that. So I say all of that to say we have to strengthen we have to make the process more efficient to better strengthen the businesses that we already have. Once we do that, we can make sure that we keep our culture. We hold on to it. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose folks like us, and Panera Bread and Burger King and everyone else is going to come right in. And that's when we start to lose folks. So,
well, I will tell you that your concern is not just small business, because city county planning has to do inspections for all the businesses. Mm-hmm. But it's good. It's refreshing to hear that there's some concern around how to make sure that city county planning is looking at how to streamline or to create additional velocity for development. Because if you're, I remember when I was on city council, we approved chicken coops, and I was like, the inspector that goes out and inspects the chicken coops is the same inspector that has to go out and inspect the fact that Google is building a new building or Facebook or Apple. So having some kind of efficiencies in some of the space is going to be really important for city government. So thank you for your answer. Any other comments on economic development in our community?
I'd like to say this. I think that DuPont sort of set a standard for us, especially in the city of Durham. DuPont, major corporation, when they went into these areas to develop, they would also subsidize affordable housing. We have major corporations coming to Durham, Northgate Mall. We have major corporations coming there. There are people in the community that are concerned and worried that they're going to be pushed out of their homes because they're going to bring these higher income people in, and they're going to drive the price of the homes they live up where they can't even afford to live there. DuPont fixed that. DuPont, when they went into these communities, they actually provided affordable housing. And I'm saying the same thing. We could ask the same thing of these major corporations come here into the city of Durham too. If you're coming here, it's like Amazon is, these others, Clorox, you're coming to Durham, be willing to help subsidize affordable housing. You can do that. You can ask that of them. And the other thing I would say too is one of the things I think that we have not taken advantage of are the opportunity zones. The opportunity zones are zones that are set up in low-income communities where they have few jobs, low jobs, and they'll give you tax credits. So if you go in there and develop those places, develop jobs, create jobs in those communities, these are things that are available to us and things we're not taking advantage of because we have another agenda. The agenda is rather than trying to help those lower income communities, we're trying to push them out. There are people that attend the church that I pastor that they're now saying they have to go outside of Durham to find a place to live because they can't find anything affordable in Durham. And so these are things that are happening, and what we need to do, need to make sure that, okay, that everyone in Durham feels like they're a Durhamite. Not just the ones who have wealth, who has money, but every person feel like they have a part to play in the city of Durham. And I think that if we follow the pattern that DuPont has set for us, if we take advantage of the opportunity zones, then we could see some progress made in this area as far as addressing some of the issues that you raised up, that you brought up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not sure all the details that the city can make influence that. They can maybe create some dialogue in those spaces, but executing it would be interesting in that involvement with the other 6 members if elected. Councilman Milton, you're the last one to speak on this issue. You should have the most experience. Talk to us.
Thanks. No pressure. Good corporate citizenship is a choice, and I wish the government were as powerful as people think we are and could compel folk to follow the DuPont model. We hope that we get good corporate citizens, but it's the marketplace. As an elected official, one of my jobs is to be a brand ambassador for our city, and I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I believe all of it. Durham is the second best place to live in the country. We have one of the highest per capita PhD rates in the country. We're the startup capital of the South. A lot of times, what the government can do for businesses is stay out of their way. What's drawing good corporate citizens and folk to Durham is our strong educational reservoir. We've got a highly educated population here. We've got strong cultural resources, best theater between Atlanta and D.C., some would say New York, Atlanta, New York, and DPAC, great weather, great restaurants. So a lot of the things that are drawing people here, the government basically just gets credit for, and we stay out of the way of it. We don't have many levers or switches as a government. We don't make anything. We don't make widgets. We don't make cars. What we do is raise money and spend money. So what we can do as a government is create an environment and an ecosystem that makes success conducive, makes it conducive to success. We can't take the place of a thriving client base. You've got to build your brand. You got to make sure your food is quality or your products are good, and you have to do the work to draw your client base. We can't take the place with the public offers of a client base or a customer base. What we can do is make sure those customers are safe, make sure they're healthy, make sure their educational systems are up to par, make sure that the roads that they have to use in the transportation system they have to use to get to work is up to par. We can pass incentive packages to try and spur and contour behavior in good corporate citizens. And Leo, you said something that's interesting. A lot of times folk think of people working at these big companies, but it is our small businesses where most of our people work in Durham. And it's important that we create an ecosystem and create a context in which folk can thrive. And again, we don't make anything. The way we do that is we collect taxes and we spend money, hopefully creatively. And Pastor Williams, I wish you were running for another seat on council because everything you said, I'm not that dude you're talking about. So it's unfortunate that you're coming for this seat. You have some other choices. But again, you need 4 votes to get anything done on council. And we, but we're a government. You have to appeal to us sometimes. We saw during the pandemic, it was small business owners that came and cajoled us and pushed us to set up a fund. Leo, you were part of that leadership apparatus to help carry over our small businesses. Listen, we can bail out Chrysler. We'll bail out the auto industry. Too big to fail is an unfortunate statement. It should be too vital to fail, because big does not necessarily mean necessary. Big doesn't necessarily mean good. It just means you're big. Too vital. And if we say too vital to fail, that means that we'll focus more on companies that may not be making $1 trillion or $1 billion, but are truly the lifeline of our city. So I hope to continue over the next 4 years if elected. I'm trying to get reelected, buddy. Sorry. If reelected, to engage with my colleagues on the council to continue to make this the best place for people to live, work, and play. And Durham's doing pretty good in that regard.
You know, it's amazing. I'm trying to talk all about all these issues, and I thought we'd get further along, but time is running short. But we did get the chance to talk about public safety. We did get a chance to talk about some economic development, particularly since this was sponsored by the Black Wall Street Complex Creative and the Durham Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much. And of course, we're located at Knox Studio on the West End, and excited to give a shout out to Tyler Graves Mans for being there. Hey, so listen, one of the issues I wanted to talk around, and it's particularly for me important that we discuss, is that so many times we talked about affordable housing, and Mr. Middleton, Honorable Middleton, y'all passed a $90 million bond for affordable housing. And the truth of the matter is that's really nice and pretty, but to do that kind of affordable housing project takes time. Right, it takes a lot to implementation to make it work. But one of my big thing about affordable housing is the first word, right? Affordable. So we're talking around wages and housing and economic development, and the city council has a chance to impact from the standpoint of land use and maybe redirecting land use. I'd like to hear more around, we talked a little bit about workforce development and the opportunity that the city can make itself more attractive for corporations to come. Let's talk about housing, and not from the critical standpoint. I'd like to hear some innovative ideas on affordable housing, so that we can talk about ways that these families can have places to be and stay. I have seen that there's been change of some of the land use, that I'm seeing houses behind houses and smaller, tiny houses, and I'm just talking out loud because I'm seeing some of these creative ideas. Let's talk about ways we can get families in position so they can be able to stabilize their family unit and feel safe in the Maslow hierarchy of needs so they can grow. What's some of your thoughts on affordable housing?
I had the really awesome opportunity to tune in. Brandon Williams from the Walltown Community Association hosted a presentation on all the work that the Walltown community has been doing since 2018, and was really impressed. And actually, I said out loud that he had restored my faith in humanity, because I think often some of the conversation in Durham around affordable housing has been based in what we can't do. To your point, right? The fact that large, private entities come in and are able to swoop up either the existing kind of market rate homes, or are building at such a rate that many folks are being cut out the deal, and definitely cut out the conversation. And I'm really applauding the work that brother's been doing in terms of engaging the community, and that's one of the things in terms of policy recommendations is in what ways can the city and county planning departments actually have paid staff and dedicated staff to make sure that the community engagement process is up to speed in the ways that we're connecting with folks and putting them at the forefront, at the top of the conversation when a developer like the developer that bought out Northgate is able to have a conversation with folks in the neighborhood at the offset of the project, as opposed to on the back end once all the damage is done. I also think I had a conversation with some folks from Bragtown yesterday as well, who are working on the small area planning work. I think that's another innovative idea to really assess block by block what needs to happen so that we can look forward into the next 10 years and making sure that developers are held accountable. I would really like to see a developer oversight and accountability committee that's made up of neighborhood association leaders, housing advocates in Durham who've been doing this work for many years, who are really leading the charge to be able to hold developers accountable who come to our city. Again, who are not just extracting from our city and taking that kind of cultural nuance that makes Durham what it is. If you don't have the people here who are like moving to Mebane or moving to Hillsborough or wherever they can, buy a decent house with a good amount of land, if those people aren't here, then it's not going to be the Durham that we once knew of. And I say that still with a welcoming heart and mind that Durham is made up of many people from different backgrounds, etc. But we have to make sure that we have protections in place specifically for historically black neighborhoods and districts like Merrick Moore, Walltown, and Bragtown. And I'm really happy to know that the Longtime Homeowners Tax Grant Program got expanded in terms of eligibility to make sure that there are more target areas that qualify for the program. So I'm really excited about what's possible in Durham. I think we're on the right track. You talked about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and there are some state preemptive laws that really prevent our localities from being able to do what they can do to provide affordable housing for our residents. But, I want to be in that fight too, as much as we can, be in communication with our state legislators.
Thank you. Thoughts?
There are a lot of laws that prevent us from doing things. And one of the things people, when you hear folk running for public office, you have to be very attentive to what they're saying and get some understanding of the job they're seeking and the powers that job has, and be very clear about that. Years before I was elected to the city council, one of the things I did, I was part of the leadership apparatus of Durham's largest, most diverse, nonpartisan, issue-based, non-endorsing organization, Durham Can, here in Durham. And one of the things in my portfolio was leading in efforts on affordable housing. One of the efforts of that campaign, not my campaign, but in conjunction with a lot of people, is not far from where we're sitting today at the Willard Street Apartments. One of the things, the most powerful thing this government can do, Durham can do, all things considered, considerations of capitalism, considerations of private rights and private ownership, one of the most powerful things we can do and have done in Durham is to use our own land, what we own as a city, to do affordable housing initiatives. That's one of the most powerful things we can do. We've done it. We're going to do it at the old police headquarters. We're going to do it on Main Street with county land, literally putting our money where our mouths are. We can shout out the wind and storm the state legislature all we want, but one of the things we can do concretely, and I will continue to push, it was really surreal to be able to vote on a project that I advocated for and organized for years before it came before the council. Use our own land, number one. Number two, there's two uses of the term affordable housing. There's affordable housing, the term that politicians throw around to show that they have knowledge and they're in tune. I want affordable housing. And then when it comes to governance, there's the concretized, you got to fill in some blanks when you want to make policy based upon affordable housing. 80% AMI in Durham, we start talking about affordable housing, 80% and under. 30% gets down to kind of low income housing. So you've got to concretize and tell folk what you mean. But Farad, you touched on something. Affordability is relative.
Yes.
Affordability has to do with jobs. You talked about this, Leo. You've talked about it too. All of us have talked about it. The ability to pay your rent and to pay a mortgage is directly tied to how much you're participating in our economy. That's affordability as well. And too often, particularly for black and brown folk, the conversation about your income and your wealth and your ability to afford is separated from affordable housing. I know a whole lot of, no disrespect, I know a whole lot of affordable housing advocates who live in $500,000 houses and better. And what they do is advocate for us to stabilize and increase the stock of housing for folk at 30% AMI. But I want to have a conversation. Wait, how do you get your $500,000 house? I mean, I appreciate the work you're doing to make sure folk have 30% level housing at 80%. But tell us what happened with your family and what choices did you make to put you in a position to be able to afford? Because Black Wall Street is not just about increasing the stock of affordable housing. Black Wall Street is about owning the block the house is on. Black Wall Street is about mobility and the rebuilding of the black middle class and the black. I unashamedly speak of, tell folk that all black folk ain't broke. And part of the affordable housing conversation also has to be, how do we restore mobility and restore wealth? these legacy black neighborhoods, Brother AJ, again, I've called for a Marshall Plan type investment in these legacy black neighborhoods, the kind that the United States had after World War II, which would go to preservation, which would go to stabilizing folk, which would go to protecting the DNA of our folk. But as I said, all we do as a government is spend money, collect money, and spend money. We need to spend some real money in those neighborhoods, and I hope to, over the next 4 years, to find partners that will continue to do that.
Thank you.
I think just like what you said as far as AMI, average medium income, what they've done here in Durham is that they've merged Durham and Chapel Hill together, where the income in Chapel Hill is much higher than the income in Durham. So you're talking about the downtown Durham, where they said that 75% of the redevelopment of the affordable housing downtown, they say they're talking about starting at like $58,000. A lot of the people that I know are not making that kind of money. 75%, this is what Anthony Scott said for HUD. 75% of the 58,000 or more. Now, a lot of people that can't make that. So what that means that those who are making 58,000 are going to push out those at the 30% level who's making lower than that. And so we got to do a much better job. I was, one of the previous campaigns I was running for office, had someone from Miami to come up in support of the campaign. He said down in Miami what they did is they froze the taxes on the houses, on the homes, until they actually sold the home or the house. Now, what am I saying? What are they doing? Here in Durham, was at another session where a school teacher came to me almost in tears. She was in the session. And she was saying that much less affording to pay the mortgage on the house, she can't afford to pay the taxes on the house because they put these $400,000, $500,000 homes right beside her house that's been there for decades. So now just paying the taxes itself. The city of Durham went from evaluating the houses from every 8 years to every 4 years. What does that mean? Tax valuations are going up. My sister's taxes increased on her house 65%. These are things that we can control. These are things that we can look at closely. Why is it that people are being penalized who paved the way for these major corporations to come here, and now they brought in these and scooped up these homes and increased the values of them, where folks who've been living for decades can no longer afford to live in those same neighborhoods? So yes, we can do more than what we're doing. We can look more closely at what's going on and say these changes can be made. We don't have to set property valuations every 4 years instead of every 8 years. As a matter of fact, we do like what they try to, I know it's a state-sponsored thing, but to go through the state, but we could start, okay, bring those issues up to the state. Why is it that people have been living in houses for decades now? Because someone decided they want, and when I was younger, coming up, they had zoning. I know when I first purchased my house in the community where I live, they said that house is too expensive for that community that you're going into. And so we got those zoning requirements that keep you from putting these $400,000, $500,000 homes in a community where those homes were initially purchased $20,000, $30,000. And now these same people are on fixed income. They cannot afford to pay those increased tax valuations based on their homes and houses. We're doing the Durhamites a disservice when we allow these kind of things to happen. We'll look at the other way as though we don't know these things are taking place, but they're happening. That's why a lot of people now are leaving Durham and cannot afford to stay in Durham. I'm talking to elderly people now, telling them they're looking, as I said earlier, outside of Durham for a place to live because of the tax valuations. And we say, well, this is a great city. If this is a great city, why don't you care about the ones who made it great? And part of the problem we have in Durham, especially with the black community, is redlining. Redlining, when they had redlining to take place, it prevented blacks from owning homes and properties because they gave them these exorbitant interest rates to own a home. So what that meant, that they say here in the city of Durham, 60% of people in Durham are renters. They're not homeowners. Why are they renting? The majority of them are blacks. Why are they black? Because of redlining. They could not afford to buy those properties because of the exorbitant interest rates that took place with redlining. So now guess what? Those same properties that they were renting, they are now being forced out because since they were renting, they're selling those properties out for a higher dollar, a higher price. Those same people living in those homes for decades now being forced out. We've got to look at it like what they did out there at RDU. They zoned that property out there in RDU where imports, exports come in. so that it's not being taxed. Wait a minute, why can't we set aside zones also in the city of Durham where we know that there's been redlining going on, where we know that the black community has been negatively impacted by it? Why can't we put in place something like that? And redlining is a fact, it's a history. We know that it actually took place in the city of Durham. Why aren't we doing things to address redlining instead of acting like, okay, the way the park is now is the way that it has always been? It has not always been this way. We need to understand the history that got us to where we are now. And this is why the Black Wall Street has disappeared, has gone away, because the building of Highway 147 was done intentionally to destroy Black Wall Street and where it was in Durham. And the same thing where I live, right where I live, the East End Connector, they built it. They're going to build an Eno Loop at the northern part of Durham. And they came out protesting because, well, the endangered animals, they said. So they came back and said, what we're going to do? They revisited the building of the 147. And part of the 147 was the East End Connector. They said, we're going to go right through that community and destroy that community, another predominantly black community, again, to build a highway. We got to look at the history. Things didn't just start today. There was a history related to everything that has happened in the city of Durham. But if we're not willing to address it, those things will continue to happen.
Thank you. On affordable housing, come back to me, Leonardo. Bring me home. Bring me home.
Affordable housing, affordable to whom, is the question I always ask. I always start off the understanding of this by saying equity is ownership. We got to have stake in the city, right? But I get really frustrated when we utilize, first of all, a flawed system, a flawed metric to determine what's affordable. And the way I look at affordable housing is it being a component of affordable living. Measuring the amount of residents in our city or our communities with how much access they have to being able to own a part of what they're engaged in and what they're involved in. So everyone in this city should have access to shelter. And if they want to own that shelter, they should have access to the engaging in the process to get there. Anyone in the city who wants to start their own business, they should be able to do that, So I think, when it comes to affordable housing, it's a really complex matter, but I also think that it's just a part of affordable living. But we have some issues that are beyond our control, but we must talk about. Let me be careful. We do talk about the problem in this city a lot, and I don't want to get caught up in that.
Yes, we do talk about it.
We talk about it, and I wrote an op-ed about aboutism in the Bull City. So I'm running for council to provide solutions and provide a process for the ideas that we talk about. First of all, the reason why I say affordable to whom is we always resort to poor, black, and brown. I'm black.
What?
I'm black. And I get offended when every time we talk about black and brown, we also kind of take the word poor with it. Enough with that. Yes, we have poor black and brown people in our city. We also have poor white people in our city, poor Hispanic people in our city. So let's stop minimizing us as a people to poor. I'm not rich, but I generate enough resources to take care of my family and also take care of my neighbors. But at the same time, I can't really afford a home in this city right now, and that's a real thing. There are people in this city right now who make a decent salary, $80,000, $90,000, and they can't afford a home. Why? Because you find a house. Let's say a house next door. The house is on the market for $500,000. It's a really, really, really competitive market out there. It's volatile. So, you're making a decent salary. You have some savings, some equity or whatever, and you put up $550,000 on the offer. Well, the bank comes in and appraises it at, let's say, $450,000. Now you are responsible for the 20% closure as well as the amount of the home. So as a person making $80,000, do you have $100,000 sitting in the bank? No. But yeah, every time we talk about affordable housing, we are talking about public housing. and black and brown people. And that is, one, a disservice. Two, I think it's really shallow, and we have to do better with that. So there is a much broader human landscape that we have to consider in this process of affordability, okay? In its broad stroke. We have police officers that do not live in Durham because they cannot afford to live in Durham. And we want to talk about the culture of public safety. We have a lot of issues. And we can't minimize affordable housing as just one major component. No, it's part of a bigger picture. You know, so I talk about economic mobility because it gives access to the individual with the means and resources to be able to stand on their own and say, I have equity in this city.
Well, this has been a wonderful opportunity as we talk around Easy Speak for the Black Wall Street, Knox Studio, Durham Chamber of Commerce. I mean, all these great people that have helped make this happen today. I really like to thank the participants. We really talked around public safety, which is important to the business community, as Mark Anthony and you all have all expressed. We've talked around the importance of building community and recognizing the importance of economic development in its impact and ways it moves things forward. And lastly, we've talked about that great thing that we always speak around in Durham is affordable housing and how some solutions, innovative solutions can achieve so that we can address all 300,000 people in our community, because affordability is just not for one population base of income, but for everyone. So I'm going to try something that I'm not sure I can get done. I may have to go to Sylvester and ask him to go pray, but I'm going to pray that y'all can give us a 1 minute, 60 seconds in it reason why people should consider you to vote, recognizing that this is your audience for this is really the business community and raising awareness so that you can they'll know that you're staying focused on those issues. I understand you've got a large platform. I don't want to hear it. I want to hear your business platform in 60 seconds for this group. I don't care who starts, but I will finish. Go.
I think we've talked about some of the economic components as related to businesses, but something that I would like to see is for small businesses to think about different models that prioritize workers and worker-owned models where there is actually stake in those businesses. I think that would increase sustainability of the businesses and people feeling like they've bought into something, right? You spoke to that a little bit. And as well as that, I'm fully in support of the state minimum wage being increased to $15 an hour. I was part of the work with DBP, showed up to City Hall, and we were able to get $15 an hour for city workers, part-time city workers. As well as that, I think that for folks who want to start businesses in Durham, that we need incubation and accelerator programs to get folks on track, get folks access to capital. I would really love to see business owners who are in the city offer, and I see it happening because we have a labor shortage, right? I really applaud my contender, Leo Williams, for offering, really great incentive packages to hire new employees for businesses, and I think that's the wave we're at. One of the real benefits from the pandemic is that we've had the opportunity to see the ways that we can reconfigure, right? And so we've seen mutual aid efforts pop up in the city. I know I'm running low. I know I'm running low. All right,
it's about the time.
All right, I got you. Right.
Thank you. Next.
All right, when we opened our business, we were denied a loan 7 times. Now, there are various reasons why, but we were denied a loan 7 times. But when we decided to bet on ourselves, dissolved my teacher retirement, got in, started painting, building tables, I put everything I had into that business. Now, I think we probably disagree mostly on the ownership part of this, but I'm not giving up part of what I sacrificed everything for to build, to give that to someone that may not have the same investment as I, but I will work to make sure they can do the same thing I did, but not have to go through the hell that I went through to open it. But I'm a business owner. I pay my staff well. I make sure that they have access to health care, retirement. I'm doing it. It's about practicality for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I would say that what we could do is that the poverty rate in the city of Durham is greater than the state of North Carolina and greater than the country. And what I would say is this right here, that we would incentivize those in poverty, that we will go in, we'll try to lift them up out of poverty by getting, just like we did with the 5 hotels downtown, that they incentivized, get them about $10 million. You could take that same money and put it into these areas where the opportunities those have identified as being high poverty areas, and incentivize businesses to go in there and create jobs for the people in those communities.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. Stefano up. Let's go.
I'm the only candidate in this race in any contest that has the endorsement of all of Durham's 3 major PACs, because I believe that leadership is a Latin word for sometimes you have to piss your friends off. And in building coalition, sometimes you got to say yes, sometimes the friends, and no, sometimes the friends. I'm going to continue to cast votes and advocate for policies across the board that bring people together, one, and create an environment and ecosystem for businesses to thrive if they're responsible, and for our residents and citizens to participate if they're prepared. There has to be a meeting between responsible businesses and prepared residents. I'm going to continue to push for policies, as I've done, to make that a reality in Durham. Thank you.
Thank you for attending Black Wall Street Speakeasy. Thank you, candidates, for your courage, your commitment, your candor, and hopefully your success. Either way, I hope you take the attitude that you don't lose, you learn. And when you win, you're going to get it. All the best. God bless. Peace. Love y'all, love y'all. Peace. I love all y'all. That's a dope. The mic sounds nice. Check. One. Thank you. Man, look at you. Stand still. All right, now y'all take it easy. Be blessed. Take the opportunity. Peace out.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, that's right here too.
What's up, man? Yes, sir, man. My brother. You're doing all kind of things with your hands and stuff. You're doing all the moves.
Used to hang out and get big all the time. Good to see y'all, man.
Oh, these alphas in the secret handshake. It's funny.
Don't be mad. Yo. Oh, shit.
Oh, shoot. Dude, I think you're
Thank you.